Hi and welcome to this webinar on Beyond TRIFR, selling safety culture to the board. It's tremendous to have so many people registered to this incredibly important topic. And it's also awesome to have a special guest along with us today, Gillian Hamilton from Managed Damage. Thank you, Gillian, for joining us. Your insights into this topic are well sought after from the questions that we've already received today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Gillian, Gillian is the founder of Managed Damage, Safety Governance Institute and NFP Safety Governance Foundation. Following her extensive career across many industries, she saw the need to approach safety in a different way. She's responsible for the design of risk dollarization and has written a book, Risk Dollarization, to the same effect. Gillian is an expert at providing support to boards on how to set quality targets to help organisations achieve their strategic objectives. So, Gillian, cannot wait to hear what you have to say today.
Thanks very much.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Centis, the mission of Centis is to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. We do that through the application of psychology and neuroscience to increase culture. So we do that through safety culture diagnostics, leadership development and team development. And this topic fits really well with the conversation that we're having with a lot of our clients. The tool that we're using today to run this webinar is called GoToWebinar, and you can see the control panel up on the screen here. You can collapse and expand that control panel at any time through clicking the little orange arrow. Everyone will be muted for this webinar. However, you can send comments and questions at any time throughout, and I'll be keeping track of them on the iPad in front of me. And if the question's relevant and we've got time, I'll be interrupting Gillian to take us on that journey. The webinar is recorded and will be provided to you along with any slides and handouts after this via email, so stay tuned for that also. So as I mentioned, we've got Gillian here, who's an expert at selling safety culture to the board. And prior to this particular webinar, we actually sent out a question to many of you to see what you wanted to know about this really important topic. And we were absolutely inundated with questions. We had 30 or 40 questions that have come through, anything from quite basic through to quite advanced in regards to this particular topic. So what that has told us is that there's a requirement for us to probably start the conversation in an even playing field at the same point.
Yeah.
So the presentation that Gillian's put together today is built as a foundation, or designed as a foundation to understanding this concept of moving beyond TRIFR as a key metric, and how do we sell safety culture to the board. But this foundation will give us, I guess, a launching platform to have future conversations into the future. So Gillian, thank you again for making the time, and over to you.
Thanks so much. Look, it's a really great chance to get together and to discuss, which is absolute key, about measuring success in businesses, in particular for the board. You know, they're the people that are asking us, you know, what's happening on the ground. And it's interesting, actually. COVID has really given our profession a great platform to be heard again. And, you know, from every crisis creates an opportunity. And the greatest opportunity is that finally safety professionals were called immediately to the boardrooms around the globe. Safety professionals are being asked on a day-to-day basis to report into their CEO, to be reporting into their CFO, and to be part of risk management and crisis management teams. Now, a lot of us have moved out of that part of the crisis management, but as a lot of businesses go in ebbs and flows and ins and outs of the borders being open, the borders being closed, and trying to transition staff and business into different areas, that area flags in and out. And the importance of a risk professional, a safety professional, is actually known almost for the first time for a lot of boards. And this is really interesting. And the crisis that has presented us has also presented us an opportunity. Interestingly, for today, we're going to talk about what is it and why does my boss now deeply care about safety reporting. And it's really interesting because before the boards were presented a couple of old data sets, you know, TRIFR, and LTIFR, and as we all know, well, some of us might not know, when you look in a board report, and especially for shareholders, LTI stands for long-term investment. Now that's a fantastic thing for people. You know, you get a return at the end of this long-term investment. But an LTI, in the sense of safety, is a horror, and it's a horror for our clients. And you know, it's something that we've had an incident so bad that someone has had to have the whole day off. And we start to get this real challenge because we speak one language and our boards and our leaders in business speak a completely different language. So yeah, this is why at the moment it's very interesting to see that now our bosses and our boards deeply care about safety reporting. And the key here is why. Now, the why people might think is because we had COVID and everybody, could have died from COVID, or, there's some really serious issues with, people were vulnerable and we had to stage ourselves back to work. There's another level of why that we're not really talking about, and it's about the element of funding, okay? So, contrary to popular belief, money does not grow on trees. It's interesting, right?
I was saying earlier, I wouldn't mind one of those trees.
It's interesting. If that was my tree, obviously it may not have as many of those. You'd only have to ask my husband and say most certainly not. But what I do need to say is that each of our businesses, no matter how firm they are in the sense of really liquid with lots of cash, or even with, if they're going really well with COVID, or even if they're not going really well with COVID, a lot of business operations operate by having to lend money to be able to function. So that we need to have cash, which is liquidity, to buy things, to invest, and to be able to move forward in business, to grow. And if your business is doing really well and you want to have a big surge, you need to go to the bank and get some cash. You need to be invested, you need to be funded. Now, the reason why that your bosses are starting to really care about safety measurements is because of who you're asking for this money from. So we're asked for money from investors, and there's been some really interesting movements post-COVID in investments. Now, the interesting movements are that people are starting to reignite the ESG fire. Now, what the hell is ESG is the question that we move to. Now, banks and investors, they really care deeply about ESG. Now, ESG is environmental, social, and governance factors. Now, ESG is hot topic. It's in every newspaper at the moment. It's in all your board papers at the moment. Now, if you haven't heard ESG, you might have heard SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. If you haven't heard SDG, you might have heard of GRI, Reporting Index. There's all these measurement tools and acronyms that are like all over the place. And these things are never taught to any safety professionals along their way. And even so, to business professionals, you have to do special courses to learn about these measurement tools and the like. Now, it's interesting, post-crisis, and in the past, even in previous crises, the GFC that occurred in the past, people flocked to ESG investments. So what this means is that banks and investors are looking to put their money in places where they're going to do good. Now, they're going to do good to the environment, they're going to do good to society or social, and they're going to do good for governance, as in they're going to make sure that the money that they're investing is going to actually be returned, because the board and the others are actually looking after where is this investment going. Now, interestingly, there's been some really big ignition in this piece. So we are seeing ESG funds, which is where people who've got quite a bit of money in their pockets, they go, look, this has been a terrible crisis. I want to do something really good with my money. I'm only going to invest in sustainable or ESG funds. Now, we've seen from 2011, which is when that last crisis hit, 99 to 392, that's a 400% increase in ESG dedicated funds. So that means that investor groups are, there used to only be 99, which were specifically and only for sustainable investing. We've moved up to 392 of those particular groups.
Yeah, wow.
So globally, the people who invest our businesses now deeply care about ESG, about environment, society, social, and governance. So where does safety fit in this mix? Okay, so it's interesting. Some of the things, the measurement tools and how you're going to get funded, they ask for particular reporting mechanisms to say, how is your business ES or G? And the activity around merging, the activity around acquiring, the activity around selling, all that activity is really focusing around these measurement tools. Now, in all these measurement tools, they are still using the latent reporting of TRIFR and LTI, which is why all of our boards are suddenly deeply and crazily imported in these stats again. So it's really interesting because this fire being reignited, when you start to really look deeply at each of these measurement tools, you'll notice that the reporting measures they're using are really outdated. You know, the reporting measures that they're using are not really delivering the value and or capturing the value that a business can deliver, especially in safety. Now, safety has been one of those elements of governance that's been snubbed.
Yep.
And we'll go into the reasons why as we move forward. So there's been a lot of actually a research about ESG funds, and there's some predictions there that in 2030, just a few years ahead, that we're looking at 95% of all investing to be ESG. So, I mean, that's huge when we look back at 2018 with 33% of the funds coming from ESG, moving to half in 2021, that's right now, and there's predictions that we're going to move as far as 95%.
Well, look, I wouldn't be surprised. You only have to look at the media and whether organisations support social causes or don't, and the public's response to that. The tolerance, I think, from the public for organisations not to hit ESG is becoming less and less.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because the other thing that's flagging alongside these times as we move forward in the years is the element of the power of the people, the element of social media. Okay, so social media is now your front page newspaper. So in the past, businesses and governments and agencies and organisations used to be able to really manage the narrative, or manage what we hear and manage what we see and manage business like reputation quite nicely, because there was like 4 newspapers that were printed every day, and you go to the newsstand and you pick up those 4 newspapers and off you go. And then the person would pick up the newspaper and they would read it page to page, end to end, and that's what you had. That was your source of information. Now we have vast sorts of information, and the information is not only being shared by a number of key media agencies. We've got media being delivered in all kinds of form, not only from a media, but from just regular people, from me to you. So, you know, maybe I'm going to drive from you know, my house to your workplace, and I don't even have to check the news to know if there's an accident. I could check Facebook and I would know beforehand.
Yep.
And it was really interesting during the floods, and also to check the road worthiness between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, where my husband was travelling from day to day, because he was leaving very, very early. The information for the government websites about whether the road was open or not was not as fresh as some of the Facebook information that was being shown. So now we're living in a world where the level of information, the way that we engage with each other and the way that society engages with each other is so large that there's these huge risks to businesses around reputation, and especially if there's an incident, the way to manage any error that would occur. You know, the fact that in the past you just had to manage those 4 newspapers, please don't run that article, I'd be very pleased, versus it's already gone viral, and in seconds, because a lot of businesses are allowing the telephones in the workplace, and often need the media devices in the workplace to conduct work, because we are now so online and so 24/7. So
it's a challenge. So what I'm hearing is you've got investor pressure, you've got pressure from the public, and we've got a set of tools that aren't fit for the job, basically, to be able to, I guess, manage safety effectively and elevate that conversation effectively at the board?
Yeah, so the measurement tools are a little latent, and it's interesting because the people that are creating these measurement tools are financial experts.
Sure.
Okay, so the non-financial experts, so safety professionals and or safety scientists or safety practitioners, are not being brought to the same conversation and the same table. So it's interesting, actually. You know, what we're also seeing as part of this ESG investing is like people like Larry Fink, who's he's the head of BlackRock, and they are like really known for sustainable investing. And they say that, and there's stats that if you have a sustainable investment, the return is even better.
Yeah, right.
So when you think about, you know, businesses that are listed, and when you think about businesses that are always funded, you know, when I look at most businesses today, they're really green. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you walk around, even BP, they changed their whole entire logo to look like a green flower. Even though they are a petrochemical industry, they are pitching themselves as green because that's the only way they can be funded, and that's the way that they do business. Now, any single business that we talk about today, they all are, when you look into their way their business is presented, we've got lots of green efficiencies and lots of measurements around being green, and there's even legislation around green reporting. Now, interestingly, if you go back to the core documents that businesses are mandated by, the corporate governance frameworks, there's lots of listings about environment. So I'm going to talk about that again shortly, and it's very metric ordered, and that came after some significant environmental incidents. So right now is a perfect time. We've had a significant safety incident, which is around this pandemic, which is a public health issue. This is when is the time to reignite that fire around safety measurement tools, and to get some really neat outcomes. And that's where I think we're really at in society today, globally.
Yeah, and look, that's certainly what's come through on the questions that we've received leading up. But people are stuck. People don't know where to start. And from what I'm hearing from you is understanding the organisation's strategy, understanding where we're trying to go, you know, and looking at safety as part of that becomes a really crucial part of the conversation. Yeah,
so it's really interesting because now, you know, when you look in the news, when you look all over the place, for the first time, you know, safety is in the news every day. And it means that it's on the core mindset of your board because, you know, having to influence your board from, you know, a safety professional up to your CEO, you know, push through the CEO to get to the board is a bit tricky sometimes, and has been for many years, especially with the safety agenda. But right now, and let's be honest, I am a calculating woman. Risk dollarization might, you know, give you a bit of a tip, but a lot of business, you have to be funded to be able to do things. So it's about dollars, okay?
It is.
So right now, the boards deeply care about ESG because that is their definition of how they get funded. Now, if safety becomes one of those measures in the ESG measurement tools, then they start to deeply care about safety. And it's a perfect time for risk and safety professionals because we are on the agenda, and this is our chance to really have some warm and deep conversations. And I think that's why the questions are so deep today, because we're starting to have those questions with our boards. They're saying, quick, I need to report in before the end of financial year. We're trying to get funded in our last quarter, and we need to give some good measurements through, and can you help me, is what they're being asked of the safety professionals. So, you know, that's where we're going.
Well, and look, even boards and some of the boards that I've been talking to and some of the CEOs, the spidey senses are tingling around lost time injury frequency rates. Often their bonuses are tied to these numbers, but something isn't sitting right. You know, but again, how do we tackle that? How do we actually make sense of this quite complicated issue?
Yeah, look, I think we need to go to the core. And when I say the core, we need to go to where is these corporate governance principles coming from? And, you know, when we start talking about those, we're looking at the ASX principles for Australia, and internationally we're looking at the S&P 500 and all the different listing agencies and what are their corporate governance frameworks. Now, we went through and did a review of all these corporate governance frameworks last year in all the different languages. Me and Google Translate are buddies now. And it's interesting because we found that the number of times that the word safety and or employee or non-financial risk was used was so very low. And that's why I mentioned that environment piece before, because the environment piece is so high. You know, so the rules that the investors give to boards about how they're to manage their cash and how shareholders are to be managing their money and their investment in your business has been very well defined about environment. And now it's time to really evolve that for safety. And where do we go? We go together. And we'll talk some more about that. Just a couple of weeks ago, the S&P 500 is saying that safety is now the social license to operate. You know, our customers are demanding a safe work environment. Our customers are demanding a safe shopping environment. You know, people want online or they're not going to buy from you. People want, if it's, you know, high risk COVID times, they want to be able to do a click and collect so there's less contact. People are, you know, when they go to your workplace, they're judging you about how clean a table is anymore. They're judging all the wait staff. Have you wiped that down 3 times before I arrived? And did you do it in front of me? Which is very different to the way we used to operate just 12 months ago, or 12, 18 months ago now. So, you know, we are living in a place now where safety is something that our customers are now demanding, and that is new, because before, you know, we weren't really getting those demands from our customers. And I think that safety is now the new green. Now, it won't replace green. It will be the new fire that comes in this ESG piece. And that's where the real opportunity is for our businesses, and particularly for our workers and for the end users, our customers, and for us, the risk professionals, to be able to steer this ship, to be able to help our businesses understand our metrics and provide really good outcomes for our business and help us get to those places.
Right, so safety, the new green.
Safe is the new green.
Yeah, right.
This is my prediction, so stand by. I think that's where we're going to go.
Well, tell us more. Where do we go from here?
So the ESG piece gets people funded, right? So this funding thing is really interesting, because even Larry Fink of BlackRock a couple of weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, they were saying that you'll get a better interest rate if you have really good stats for your ESG. So even the guy who inverted commas is like so hot for ESG right now is being measured when he goes to the bank to get his loans. So what we're talking about is trying to get safety through the area of risk within a business. And to do that, we need to understand how a business understands risk. So safety is categorized as a non-financial risk. And you know, there's the two things of financial and non-financial risk. Now, we all know that safety costs money in different areas. So, you know, we have to buy PPE, or we have to pay for, you know, a particular process to be done a certain way, or we have to hire an extra thing. That is definitely so, and there is of course money that can be assigned to different things, hence why, you know, risk toleration is birthed from my side of the fence. But safety as a class is deemed an operational risk, and it is a non-financial risk. So if you were to look at the different business classes that we've got up there, you've got financial risk, external market risk, and non-financial risk. So the financial risk is what we just talked about, is about how to get funded. Okay, so the credit risk about, you know, I heard in S&P last week that, you know, if you're doing poorly in your workers' comp rates, if you're doing poorly in, you know, if you've been downgraded by the S&P 500, you're going to pay more for your credit. You know, so when you want to get a loan, your rate's going to increase. So before, safety wasn't even appearing in financial risk, but now you want to get a loan, safety's even in credit risk. It's definitely in market risk right now, because if someone wants to invest in you, they're most certainly not going to invest in you unless you're delivering a safe outcome for your customers and for your staff, and COVID's brought that to the fore. And, you know, we talked about interest rates, and we talked about having liquidity. You're not going to get funded by all the houses that are dropping money in unless you've got a good ESG record. And again, we see safety appearing now for the very first time in this financial risk in a very bold way. It was never so bold before, and this is the opportunity. Now on the external market risk, of course, the largest piece you can see there is that reputational risk, okay? It's strategic, of course. I mean, currently, businesses decide whether they can go somewhere or do something based upon borders and other things right now. But this reputational piece, our customers are watching us. They are questioning us. They are measuring us every day about whether it's clean enough, whether they feel safe to come and visit us, and do they want to do business with us in regards to the recent pandemic. Safety drops into this non-financial risk. So all the other non-financial risks that occur is your compliance risk, your conduct risk, cyber risk, third-party risk, and model risk. So, safety fits neatly into a couple of those barrels, under operations and into compliance. So it's very interesting because boards are schooled in a lot of their training courses to avert their eyes from operational risk. So it's very tricky when we start to say to boards, now you need to be across operations, and particularly around this COVID piece, and also now that ESG wants them to be safe and understand these parts as well. Boards have got some new things to learn. Business leaders have got new things to learn, and that's a huge opportunity for everybody to learn together.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a where do you start tackling all of that learning process? And I mean, a lot of the questions we've got coming through is that education piece needs to roll all the way through to that board. And you and I were chatting earlier, often those board members, they're in those board positions because they're quite senior and they've been around for a long time, but this is a whole new kettle of fish, really, isn't it?
Yeah, look, and it's part of that change factor that we've got to help our businesses through. As the times change, we need to help them adjust. We always need to learn. And unfortunately, the time we need to learn is now, and it needs to be in a fast forward button, because it's dire straits for businesses to be funded, and it's dire straits for us to make sure that we are delivering a product that our customers need, want, and demand. And the need, want, and demand is very different than it was just 18 months ago. We are having trouble to convince people to leave their homes. We are having trouble to convince people to come back into the office where it's safe to go. There is a lot of convincing that needs to be done, and all this convincing is by providing safety trust to our customers and providing safety trust to our workforce and providing safety trust to our clients. All of those things are coming to the fore right now. And that is one of the reasons why we recently started the Safety Governance Foundation, which is providing that assistance to businesses and is a non-for-profit in that area. So those things are something that we can talk about later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So corporate governance is how the organisation must operate to protect shareholders' investments. And corporate governance is about being a good corporate citizen. Now, we will find that a lot of the very big ASX listed companies are already working very hard to be seen as a good corporate citizen, but as ESG really fires up and this need for metrics and being safe really starts to flag through, you as a subcontractor to some of those top tier ASX companies, you're going to start getting those demands pushed way down to you and fast. And that's where I think a lot of our questions are really falling from. So we talked about the reputation piece before, but for me, I think the reason that all of this has really come to the fore is that we as people have moved all the way down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've gone away from the, selfie style, and, we don't really care so much about actors, and, it's not really for us anymore. We're about survival. We're about the physiological. We want food, water, shelter, and safety. And when we need those things, that's where we've pushed all the way down, and that's come from our crisis. And I believe that this is the core reason why all these ideas about ESG, about what people want, about what the customer wants, I believe that is our real core. And we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we've really popped it, we've smashed down that triangle, and that's, for us, a new thing. And I just wanted to quickly show people what is an organisation to the business world, and to really show a little couple of interesting pieces about who we are as business professionals, who we are as employees, where we sit in this world of the organisation. So this is a Bob Tricker's Bob Trigger is a corporate governance legend, and this is his diagram, and it talks specifically about the 4 different areas of an organisation, external and the internal. So internal is the board. They sit in the very middle of an organisation. They steer the ship, okay? They are the conscience for a business, and they go and they take the business where they need to. Yep. And we see that this is the opportunity for safety to have its seat at the table. And when we say that, we say we want safety to be a conscience instilled in all board leaders. And I think these questions show to me that they are absolutely trying to go there. And yes. This is really great news. And so the organisation sits as this little triangle, then you've got your board that steers the ship, and then you've got your shareholders, which they report to, and they obviously fund the business as well, and they can come and go very quickly. And then you've got the independent auditors who tell us whether they're meeting their requirements or not. And then you've got these other elements. So you've got sources of equity finance, so the finance we talked about, sources of debt finance, and then you've got other stakeholders, which is like competitors, government, other influencers and political groups. But then you've got contractual stakeholders. So an employee is a stakeholder. Now, you'll see a bit later on, there's a bit of a joke about a stakeholder. But we are seen as external to the core of a corporation. And so this repurposing of companies in this great reset that's sort of going on right now really is seeing like we have to really start to care about our stakeholders in our business. And we're really starting to see that actually our customers are so key vital, and they are key stakeholders, and that our employees are also sitting in there as part of our contractual stakeholders. And I believe that with COVID, this has been where we have this huge reignition of this real focus on purpose with our stakeholders, and that's why we start to have this conversation quite nicely. So here's our stakeholder, and this is our stakeholder worker, and I don't know, maybe he's calling his work cover lawyer, I don't know, but the stakeholder is our worker, okay, and the stakeholder is also our customer. When we start to talk about the definition of material, we've had some alterations. So when I'm talking about material, I'm not talking about Spotlight, okay? I'm not going down to the shop and buying some material to make a dress. Yeah. So in the stock exchange world and where big businesses do work, the word material is very sensitive, okay? Because if something's material, if something happens, an event in a business happens, say there's an incident, whether it be, there was a huge loss in shares or we bought something or whatever, you have to tell something that's very important because to the shareholders. You have to write a note and tell people publicly something that happened. Now, I believe the definition of material has grossly altered because of COVID, and I believe that safety has jumped right in there with its definition of material, because before, we've had really low fines. Before, safety wasn't really so important to a customer, but now in Australia, for example, the fine costs have gone all the way through the roof. Now board members, it's illegal to get insurance if you got a fine to cover it off. Now board members may, if there's something terrible happened, they could be called to court, but also then there's jail time in very worst case scenarios. That now is very bloody material. Now, if I'm a board member, I want to know everything about safety because these laws have changed, and I want to know my metrics right now because I need to make sure that I'm getting the right information and I'm going to be safe and I'm not going to be dragged through court by something that's going on in my organisation, and I need to start learning about that. And that's super important to them.
So hence the focus on give us that TRIFR data, because at the moment that's the indicator that they're using to determine how safe they are in this circumstance.
Correct. And that's the information that the investors are asking for. That's the measurement tool that our clients are asking for when we go for a tender. That's the number we pop in. And so they want to know that because that's the number and the figure that we've sort of been trying to teach boards about for like a million years. And as we know, that's a number that's caused a lot of havoc in the industry. It's a number that's caused people to hide incidents. It's a number that's caused people to drag people back to work with one arm, quite literally. It's caused people to do all kinds of unusual things, all based upon chasing a number instead of chasing an outcome. I think that is why entirely that we're starting to see that real interest from our boards.
Yeah, and it's a big challenge, right? Because even our data shows that between a third and a half of incidents in most organisations go underreported, and so the issue is coming not only from the board but investors and beyond that. So how do we tackle this?
Yeah, so look, I mean, there's a real conversation that needs to be ignited globally, and that's why the Safety Governance Foundation is global, for example. We want to start having this conversation to start creating specific frameworks that slide into corporate governance frameworks around the world that start to say, look, having an incident is not actually, reporting an incident is not a bad thing. Not reporting an incident is a horrific thing, because you start to slide things under the table.
Yep.
And as a result, you start to have some really serious incidents get bigger and bigger under this table, and all of a sudden you're having those fatals. And I think that that's where some of our culture issues have come from in some of the highly reporting measured already industries like mining, for example, because there's this real focus on your TRI, there's this real focus on your LTIFR, and there's this real focus to put things under the table and not report, as you've said. And it comes from the clients, it comes from your subcontractors, and now it's coming from like, where are we going to report, how are we going to report, and if you do report, you're getting downgraded in your in your ratings. So this is somewhere where we absolutely need to get together and talk to people like the World Economic Forum and talk to the other people that are setting these metrics and say the metrics you've got is either A, causing harm, or B, incorrect, because the numbers you're testing, I mean, would you want to do it on 200,000, have a great score? You want to do it on 1 million? Let's choose a number.
Well, and you sort of go beyond that. I was chatting to a CEO about this just last week, and he said their TRIFR has started creeping up. Not a heap, but it's had a slight incline over the last 6 months. But also so has all the near miss reporting and all the other what would be classed as lead indicator data across there. So he's in a tricky position where on one side of things he feels like there's more trust and more engagement from the workforce and safety, but these incidents are getting reported, so the pressure's crashing down from the board to say, well, the main metric that actually matters isn't moving right now. So it's this really uncomfortable conversation. Yeah,
and look, I think the conversation needs to be that they're the wrong measurement tools.
Yep.
And I think the measurement needs to be new. And I think we do need to start using figures that our board already uses, and numbers are definitely one of them. And there's some great measurement tools that already exist around the place, particularly around workers' compensation rates. Yep. Workers' compensation rates, your rate versus the gazetted rate, is one very great measurement tool, and there's hundreds of other kind of financial measures, and we were talking offline before about now in business, we have all these amazing data sets. Before they weren't there, so we've definitely got some more things to talk about. So, for me, I think that safety has ultimately become so material. And just give you some examples of material safety impacts. So, Tesla's car had a, driverless car, not the one just recently, but the one that's been reported on, we have a report for, had a terrible incident, and the autopilot driver assistance system was actually engaged during a fatal crash a couple of years ago. Now, overnight, Tesla lost $5.1 billion on the share market. Just one incident, okay? Right. So our shareholders are absolutely talking the metric of, well, I'm going to sell my shares because I don't want to do business with you if your car that's supposed to be safe was on autopilot and it hit somebody. Now, that is, I'm not saying that right now that's not the case for Tesla, but I'm saying that incident caused that decrease, huge financial impact. Now, also the Samsung Note 7, remember the little Samsung Notes, they had a terrible habit of catching fire. And
remember that. Yeah.
And as a result, nobody could ever put a Samsung on any kind of airplane because they were worried about the airplanes catching fire. And there's this great picture, I'm so sorry, Samsung, of a car, a Jeep, in someone's front yard burning on fire vividly from a Samsung being left on the dashboard. Now, that alone, just the recall, not the lost sales, not the lost effort, not all the R&D that was put into play, cost them $4 billion because they had to recall the thing.
I still remember being on a plane and people and the airline staff calling out for anyone who's got a Samsung, can you please come forward? So
yeah, we're taking those ones.
Yeah, wow.
Another reason to choose Apple Sorry, I'm an Apple supporter. And look, also, some terrible incidents that occurred with Deepwater Horizon. Now, Deepwater, I believe, is one of those measures why there's huge environmental inputs. Deepwater pre-tax was $79.4 billion for an incident losses. Okay, $79.4 billion. Okay. And, we then start to look at other areas like the Boeing 37 MAX, some really serious issues there, lost lives, 346 people lost life, $18.7 billion US. And then a close to home material safety issue, the Crown Casino. Crown Casino lost their license because of the disregard for the safety and welfare of its staff in China and its poor corporate governance processes. Now, that's $2.2 billion of a beautiful, lush casino that they've built that they could not yet walk into. The New South Wales government's lost $400 million in tax revenue, and the licence fee is $100 million that they're attempting to recover. So, interestingly, BlackRock or, and other friends are coming to buy and say that we will ensure that they are doing their ESG, that they are providing good governance. So safety is material, and it's very bloody material right now. For the first time, we have so much fire in this area. It's really, really hot. So we think that when the definition of material changes, the measuring sticks absolutely need to change. And that's why I was talking about, the TRIFR is an old measurement. It's got some great history. We've been there. And I think it's time for a change in the measuring sticks. And I think that to do that, we need to bring financial and non-financial professionals together. And unless we do, we are going to really suffer because, we're getting financial people making our measurements that we need. So interestingly, I went through and had a look at all the EU and I went through all the different corporate governance frameworks. Now, if you look at those 23 countries that are yellow, looking at the corporate governance frameworks, which is what a business is held to by their investors, those 23 countries that are in yellow account for 80.45% of the world's GDP. So 80% of the world's GDP, wow. 47%, 48 nearly, percent mention the environment, and only 21.7% mention safety.
That's all right. So
we are, for corporate governance requirements for what the shareholders are demanding, only 21% of those 80% of the 23 nations, 80% of the world's GDP, are asking our businesses to report effectively on safety. So, there's a whole nother level of activity to go on there to introduce and to help the corporate governance agencies to include their metrics for safety as well. So, that's another level again. If you look at the US, there's no safety elements whatsoever mentioned in any of the corporate governance frameworks. So it's a really interesting read through the thousands of ones that are there. Now, I talked a little bit about the World Economic Forum before. Now, they at the moment have been working towards common metrics and consistent reporting of sustainable value creation. So they call, having a good business as sustainable value. Yep. So they want a business to be sustainable, and they want to create value, and they want it to keep coming. They want to make good money, but they've started to do these reportings. Now, this was released in last year, just post-COVID. At the commencement, and we contacted through a friend and said, look, we really need to work away from these TRIs. Yep. We need to work towards some other stats, and really fantastically, we've got PwC, EY, and Deloitte are in there, KPMG. They were really great, and they threw in there monetize impacts of work-related incidents on an organisation. Yeah. So they've got an adapted indicator that's based on the EU Commission and Safe Work Australia, and I think that's where we start to see some better statistics coming through, because a percentage of revenue on the percentage of costs via some of these things. So we have to make sure that we're not just saying a dollar amount, it's percentage of revenue, can start to really measure a business's performance X versus Y. So, you know, and they're also talking about employee well-being, and they're talking about other elements like that. So we're starting to see the expansion of that. Now also GRI's 403, 403, which is the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative for Safety, 403, they're doing a lot of work as well at the moment about improving the current measures. And again, I repeat to our audience that this is a current moving beast that is really fast moving, and you'll start to see some really good results there. At the moment, we're trying to compare apples and apples, except we're even comparing the wrong apples to the wrong apples.
Yeah.
And so, even if we're just comparing apples and apples, at the moment we really do have green and red apples, and they're very different in our current reporting that we're giving. And so it's really hard for the ASX and other listing agencies to be assured by even the stats we're giving, and the superannuation, funds that are funding, it's hard for them to be assured by our stats because the way we even produce them are different. Some would say that we're comparing apples and oranges, and I would say that at times we're comparing apples and donkeys, like we really are having a terrible idea with it. And sometimes I would say that we're really comparing really fresh apples with apples that are just completely done, and we're jamming them together and we're saying this is our stats. And it's because we just haven't, as a society, as risk professionals working with not with financial experts, we haven't got together and created those great metrics together. And I think this is the time when we really get to have a chance to do that and do it really well.
Yeah, so we're missing, from what I'm hearing, we're missing a standard across the business that we're able to really meaningfully measure against. So as a result, we're sort of reverting back to TRIFR, because in the absence of something more useful, then TRIFR seems to be the benchmark. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's not that seems to be the benchmark. It is the mark that's been called by all of these agencies to report. And there's some really good additional reporting that's being suggested by Safe Work Australia in their measuring reporting. And there's next steps to go on top of that. So, but unfortunately, the people that are asking you to report, they are not calling on the new measures. They're calling on the historic measures, which is your TRIs and your LTIFRs. So we are working against a standard that's way outside of our current business scope, and that your business is being demanded to meet. So it really is a job for us as an industry and globally to get together and start talking about the new measures that need to be.
Hence the purpose of this conversation as a way of addressing those questions, because until we elevate the conversation to the right level with the right why and what's in it for me, then it's going to be very difficult for us to actually tackle anything else.
Correct. And that's why I thought we'd give a bit of a background about why we're here today and why the questions are so deep and so meaningful, is because of this history as to where we are right now. And look, right there on the screen is all the lists of, your business might be measured by UN Global Compact, they might be measured by SDGs, they might be measured by ECO, they might be measured by you might be measured by all of these, depending on where your business operates. And if you're a truly global business, you probably have to report on every single one of those measures. And you probably and one measure doesn't suit for someone else, and it depends where you're getting your funds from, whether it matters for somebody else. So, as I said, we've done some financial approach to non-financial risk and some, specific measurement tools for different people. But when we were talking before, I wanted to flag back and talk to you about, the background of our boards. What is their experience? Now, it's very difficult to ask somebody to talk about non-financial risk, particularly safety, if they don't have that experience. Now, this is the S&P 500. This accounts for billions and billions of dollars worth of money running through the world. Now, what makes up board members? They did a survey. This is last year's figures came through. Is that board members are retired CEOs or active CEOs, functional line leaders, financial executives, investments, presidents, others, bankers. Now, by the time we get there, 90% of every single person sitting on a board is a financial expert.
Yep.
They are not non-financial risk experts. Now, I would say to you that at best, I believe 0.1% would have a safety experience.
Yep.
0.1. And, even in consultants, we're not talking about safety consultants in that number. We're talking about marketing experts and financial consultants and all different other kinds. So I would definitely say that we are lacking in that area. So it's time for us to work with our boards to help them, because that's not their background.
So how do we speak, and again, how do we speak the language of boards to drive the right agenda, to get the right outcomes, to get people home safe?
Yeah, and I think the conversation has to be in the same language, and their language is dollars. And so when we look at that, I think, we're up to a new time, and we need new messages, and we need new reporting metrics. So, there is ways that you can do that. We do have, safety governance courses, and we do talk about reporting in those. But I think we are into a new time. So it's a time for a new meaningful measurement tools. And it's a time for us to do that together. We are the experts, so are your bosses, and together we need to get together and create good metrics for good business.
Oh, look, that's excellent, Gillian. And I'm going to hand it over to the audience if they've got any questions now. But I guess what I'm hearing is we need to think about the strategy of the organisation, what we're trying to achieve, the people that are sitting within that board, and how safety plays into that strategy to help us achieve our financial outcomes and shape our conversation to suit that. And until we get that conversation, until we get the ownership at the board, till we get the buy-in, it makes it difficult to shift those other metrics, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think as I said, is that we're in prime time right now. I think our boards have never been warmer to have conversations with and to talk freely and openly about safety measurements. And, we have never had a time such as this. And that's why it's absolutely superfluous. It's a perfect time.
And look, the comments we're getting come through are agreeing with you. So Will said TRIFR is an outdated lag indicator and shouldn't be the focus within an organisation, although TRIFR doesn't measure a safe site, or it is not a measure of safety. So we're getting a lot of positive response. So if we flick to the next slide here, I think actually it's the past one here. So you've got your Safety Governance Institute that you've
the foundation. So if anybody wanted to, they could put their phone onto that Q scan, and also we're sending out the slides. For no charge, you can become part of the Safety Governance Foundations, which is the non-for-profit, and we are working specifically with all elements of safety governance, which of course includes measurements. If you want to be kept up to date with that at the great price of no charge, you can be part of that group, be part of our organisation, and that's a way for you to stay connected and to be able to have a say, because we're very interested in what people need, and we do want to start doing some very developed surveys about what is it that you want and what is it that your business needs. And look, we're doing deep research into existing reporting tools and working really hard together to be able to create changes in the corporate governance frameworks, which together we can do.
Great. So if you want to be part of the conversation, we'll QR scan that now, or we'll be sending this out. I really do encourage as many people to jump on board with that as possible, because it's not without that critical mass and the brains trust who are all listening in today that we're going to find some better ways of doing things. So I've had a question come through from her. She said, what are the lead metrics on safety which go beyond TRIFR? So look, the lead metrics, I would strongly urge you to go to the Safe Work Australia measuring tool. There's a great report there that has a lot of data that you can, measures that the boards could be asking for. For me, I think it's very important that you think about relativity at all times. Now, when I use the word relativity, I mean we have to make sure that the figures that you're choosing are relative to your business. Now, we're always going to be asked to give particular numbers to our tenders and particular numbers to our client and maybe to our funders. But we absolutely need to make sure that the measurements that you're choosing for your business is for your business. So you need to, first of all, understand your risk to be able to know what you want to know.
So I would be really clear and say that it's very important that you understand why you're reporting in the first place and what is it that you want to know. Because reporting for report's sake is, and there was someone who said, how can we do this about safety clutter, because I don't want to have any clutter? And I completely agree. Less is more. And I would say to you that within your business already, there is thousands of metrics that you can get from your business that will help your business understand what it is that you are doing, how is your performance. And I start to talk about things like your workers' compensation costs. I start to talk to things about your legal costs for like paying for things that, if someone's had a terrible incident, how are we going to pay for a legal bill to do X, Y, and Z. I also think about, what is your physio bills. I also think about what is your suitable duties costs. It's all well and good that we've got, people who we're keeping at work, but how many people are we keeping at work just to keep at work? If the suitable duties cost is going through the roof, you're still not removing your incidents. So it's about really understanding what is it that your business that you need to know. And to create your metrics, I would say that, you definitely start at the reporting and measuring report that's available from Safe Work Australia. But then I would definitely say that you need to go further and you need to look at what is your business, what do you need to measure? And if you don't know, you need to ask for help. And you need to, talk to your accountant. Your accountant goes, well, that cost's going up through the roof. And, if you don't know who your accountant is, it's time to do so. And I've also found in many years in my business is that people don't even know what their workers' compensation rate is. They don't know what their claim rates are because they're not allowed to have access to it. Now, that is a time for us to really talk more about, because in that instance, that is the true cost of your damage and it's right ahead of you, and you can see the measurements altering, and your insurance claim costs really do and are a measure that everybody has the same measurement of in each state, and it's a really apples for apples comparison.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So, okay, so I've got another question that's actually come through here. So if less than 1% of boards have experience in safety, how does a board interpret material risk presented to them by a sustainability committee that feeds information to a board for most of those ASX 200 listed companies? Yeah,
look, I totally agree with your question and your sentiment. For me, I did some deep research on this last year. Like, I almost downed tools and went straight into this, because for me, it was like a huge aha moment of like, oh my gosh, of course that's why. If you think about confirmation bias, like if I'm looking for risk and I'm a financial boffin, I'm going to find every financial risk in this whole entire room. For me, I also have my heart here thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for boards because they don't have the the experience and also the courses, and that's why we created the safety governance courses. And I think to be able to help our boards understand that, and then I think the next level of sediment is the layer of discharge that goes from the floor where things are actually happening to the board when they finally get the information, because I think that there's so much dilution that goes on from the factory floor, or mine site, or wherever you are. The dilution that comes from the worker through to the board is so high, and I think we really have to be assured, and when we talk about that assurance, that for the board themselves, they need to demand and understand that in their business they are responsible for the operational risks in their business, and they need to know what they are. And so if they feel that they're not getting enough information, if they feel that they're being diluted, that the board themselves really need to start working down. Yep. And because that's their legal responsibility to understand that. And so if you on the floor know that there's delusion, then you need to start talking up. And helping your leaders understand that. And I think at the moment, it's never been a better time to eliminate and to really have an open door policy on, right, we're happy to talk about anything right now. Because if we could have like a period of amnesty that is now, then you can start to open those cans of worms. And maybe everybody at the same time has an increased TRIFR. Maybe at the same time everybody is stopping the hiding of incidents, and we're starting to get to the root causes of them and repairing them, instead of shoving them under tables and in bottom drawers. And by doing that, we're going to have the outcome that we want, which is not killing people at work. And that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Look, great places to start in terms of elevating that conversation.
Yeah.
If you would like to continue to be involved in elevating the conversation, there's an opportunity that will be popping up on the screen just now. So if you would like to join us for this working group to have a further conversation on elevating the safety culture case to the board, please click yes on the screen. One of our team will get in touch with you to explore things a little bit further and for you to be able to network and brainstorm some of this sort of stuff with your peers. Definitely what I'm hearing loud and clear, Gillian, is again speaking the language to the board that they understand, hitting on the points that help them drive the strategy from the business, and then it's really starting a movement of, all right, well, we're willing as a board to look beyond TRIFR at better and different measures. To that note, what you've also generously offered is people to be able to book some private sessions with you. So the other thing is we'll put that up on the screen. If you'd like to be in touch with Gillian and set up a consult to discuss your metrics and how that may play out in strategy within your business, please click yes and we'll get in touch with you. So give that a couple of minutes to go through. But again, Gillian, thank you so much for your time. It's been an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
I think a lot of us in the safety profession come at safety from it's a moral or ethical obligation, or we want to do the right thing, and of course it is. But to add that financial lens on things just boosts the conversation, gives more power to the message that we're trying to send. So hopefully everyone has found that useful. Yeah,
look, it's been really great, and I think the reason that I just wanted to share with me, the reason that I applied that financial lens is I've worked in businesses that were hard dollar businesses, and I've worked in places where absolutely there is hearts and minds, but I find that it's the 1% of people who really are focused on production, they're really focused on costs, that tend to end up with why we end up having incidents. So if we can really turn and show the value of good safety and show the value of great metrics, then we will be able to have the impacts that we need.
Great. Well, look, as I said, if you'd like to continue the conversation, feel free to join us on one of the forums we shared earlier, or hit us on LinkedIn or via email, and we'll be more than happy to get in touch with you. So again, thank you, Gillian, and thank you everyone for dialing in for the day.
Thanks, guys.